We now have a clearer picture of the impact of the new provincial budget. Many Albertans are relieved to hear no new taxes and no tax hikes, but the government will be borrowing billions to run its programs. Here's a look again at the numbers. The government has a $38.6 billion in cash for the 2013 budget, including $4 billion that it's borrowing. Now, total spending is set at $40.6 billion, leaving Albertans with a $2 billion deficit. Alberta's educators are now doing the math, trying to figure out how to make do after what they call significant changes to their funding model. Daryl Rummold reports.
There's more money for schools, less money for teachers. An election promise of 50 new schools kept, 70 buildings to be renovated, $500 million set aside in this year's budget. It's part of more than $2 billion expected over the next 6 years.
They're the best teachers and we have the best education system, and I support that. So, but right now in tough times, it would be inappropriate to provide increased finances when a lot of other Albertans aren't even seeing it.
Weddick says the provincial government will continue to work with and support post-secondary and primary education in Alberta. His biggest concern as the former Minister of Advanced Education is how those numbers will affect Lethbridge's colleges and university. He says he expects the cuts to be around 3% to operational costs. But he also believes his election promise of $55 million for an expansion at the Lethbridge College to be kept inside some $650 million allocated for post-secondary infrastructure. But others contend his promise has not been kept.
We didn't see that in the capital plan. What we saw was 18 million of 55, so we've got a missing 37 million, and I suppose it will be up to our local representatives to advocate for that funding.
Across the river, they too are sorting out the fine details, looking for ways to make the numbers work.
We still don't have all of the details at this point, and so can't really comment on the specifics other than to say that the magnitude of the cut will mean we have to make some very, very significant decisions going forward.
School boards are also bracing for impact. They expect significant changes that could adversely affect students in K through 12. Educators say they expected to face cuts in the 2013 budget. They just hoped it wouldn't be this hard.
We are going to do everything we can to make it, that the effect is least on classrooms. So we'll be looking first and foremost at other places where we can affect the changes.
While there are no new taxes, there are increases to existing fees. Mayor Mar.08 says residential education tax increases should be covered by growth, but non-residential education tax has gone up by 18%, leaving businesses to face a 4 or 5% increase to their overall tax bill.
Many people know how it's...
School board officials say they now have to find a way to mold the minds of tomorrow on the budget platform that doesn't make sense to them today. Daryl Rummold, CTV News, Lethbridge.
So back at City Hall, the reaction to the budget is mostly positive. Mayor Mar.08 says they're breathing a sigh of relief today. That's because municipal infrastructure funding has remained steady, and it's the biggest funder of Lethbridge's capital projects. Dodick says council has a number of projects that have been awaiting approval because they weren't certain what the funding model would look like. He says he's happy and relieved to see municipalities largely untouched, as Premier Redford had promised.
Overall, relief comes in there. I mean, you always want to have a little bit more money for capital projects, but the city, the way they budget their capital projects is until they actually see the money, they're not going to fund projects. So we're in the middle of the capital improvement program. We've approved absolutely nothing at this point in time, but we do know now or have a good sense as to what grants will be available for the years that are encompassed by the capital improvement program.
The Alberta budget does take significant steps forward in supporting the province's most vulnerable, including children at risk, adults with disabilities, and the homeless. Funding for homelessness support is $111 million. That's an increase of $1.2 million, which the government says will help around 1,800 homeless Albertans this year and fund more than 3,200 spaces in emergency and transition shelters. Local officials say it shows a commitment to ending homelessness in Alberta.
This is truly a good news story for us in terms of us being able to sustain the funding that we have received in past years. What this will do is provide that security to our agencies that are providing the services to end homelessness in the community.
However, the province did make cuts to a program that helped seniors cover year-to-year increases in their property taxes. The changes mean that 70,000 Albertans will no longer qualify for the Seniors School Property Tax Assistance Program, and funding for seniors' lodges has been reduced, while the budget for home care and rehabilitation has also shrunk. So what do you think of the 2013 budget that was handed down yesterday? We hit the streets to find out.
I think the province is doing its best to accommodate our population growth. There's extra demands, but however, we all have to live within our means.
I think it's really unfair. I mean, as a student, it's really hard to pay for university and student loans. So I think that the budget cuts, especially for us, will really increase the price of university.
It strikes me as strange that, you know, one of the richest provinces in Canada can find itself in a deficit situation. You know, it's just, to a layperson, obviously I don't understand economics, but it does seem strange.